Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, how are you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Hanging. We've Lundy's in the building, chilling, golden retriever style. Already getting a nap in after she woke up just hours ago. So living the life of Riley for sure through her. But chilling. How many days are we away, Maddie B? 7, 8, less than 10. 10,
10.
9 days.
Yeah, I mean, them playing on Sunday, adds that extra day of waiting. But from college football, we're only 4 days away. They got those,
Week
what, 7, 8 games, 6, 7, 8 games on
week
Saturday. So,
zero. And I don't believe Florida State gets a week zero game this year. That
yeah.
was a big talking point a year ago, as they had already played a game. LSU had not, who got the advantage there. And it was clear, at least for LSU, it looked like they were playing in their first game a number of times last year.
Yeah, I went on the War Chant, our Florida State On3 podcast. They have an awesome YouTube and channel and everything. And th- this game, the more I talk about this game, the more confounded, intrigued, all the synonyms, just by how this game could go, because there's a million different factors and things you can consider. Like last year was such a weird outlier game for LSU. But I'm very excited. So we will have plenty of Florida State talk up on our site, obviously, and on the YouTube in the coming week. But today kind of wraps up fall camp for us, and also kind of starts to look ahead. We had Brian Kelly speak with the media on Tuesday evening. We'll get the players tonight. We'll see what players we get, but there are some points that Brian Kelly hit on yesterday that I wrote a story about, but also I wanted to talk about in a little bit more depth. And we have three major talking points from the presser and from the scrimmage. And the first one, at least probably the most surprising, I guess, was Sage Ryan. Sage Ryan moves out to the boundary cornerback spot for basically the first 2 or 3 drives of the scrimmage with the first team, and then gets hurt on that final drive of his, tackling Mason Taylor, leaves the scrimmage, leaves practice, holding his arm. But he's back at practice now. He is good to go. He had a stinger to his, I assume, his shoulder, I think it was. But yeah, did it surprise you to hear Sage Ryan out at the cornerback position?
I don't know. I guess not surprising because we'd seen it some in practice and the scrimmage, but now that Brian Kelly's openly talking about it and the idea of it seems like I think it's two-part here. One, if they're putting him out there above Deuce Chestnut, they have to think that he at least can match what Chestnut brings or close to it. If not, they think he's better. And you would say, well, Shay, why would they put someone out there that maybe was just as good or maybe was, almost as good as a Deuce Chestnut? I think this could be as much about you then move Greg Brooks to nickel and Andre Sam's on the field all the time instead of on the bench rotating in at safety, and you've got Major Burns at safety. So, like, I don't know. Is this a way? Are they valuing getting Andre Sam onto the field with Greg Brooks and Major Burns at the same time so much that it bleeds over into something like, hey, instead of putting Sage on the bench, let's put him out as a boundary corner, and we feel just as good about him as we do Chestnut. I think that probably plays a big role in it.
Yeah, and as much as I think Deuce Chestnut had a pretty good fall, there were always concerns with me as far as the athleticism, the overall athleticism goes. He's 6 foot, not the quickest. Again, I think he had a fine fall, and I think he's a good cornerback. I think that he's a good option. I would have been fine if they started him at corner. But Sage Ryan is also, not the biggest guy, but he's faster. He's obviously, we knew out of high school what he was as an athlete. Like, that's a 5-star athlete there. So you put him at corner, and the hope is that he's very smart. We've talked to him before. He's an incredibly smart guy, and he tackles well from what Brian Kelly says. We'll go with what his numbers and what his data says about Sage Ryan as a tackler. So you get those two things on the field, and you hope he can kind of figure it out, because as much as we want, a guy like Deuce Chestnut that we've seen for 2 years at Syracuse play, Denver Harris, obviously, we know what he is as far as what he could be. Um, at the end of the day, there's not an answer right now at cornerback 2. There's an answer at cornerback 1 with Zy Alexander, but at the second cornerback position, there's just such a big question mark that I'm perfectly fine with them trying their hand at Sage Ryan. Like you said, I think Greg Brooks is going to start at nickel. I think that has been locked down because they want Andre Sam on the field. So you have those 3 spots locked down, and you have cornerback 1. So now it's just cornerback 2. We're kind of tweaking, trying to see what's going to work, what's going to fit. So I don't feel bad about it, but it's just they're continuing to try and see what they have.
Yeah, it's so intriguing to me too that, and you could say, look, they're in the age of the portal. This is what happens. It's a heavy, heavy dose of it at DB, specifically corner. We know the past 2 years they've taken 4 guys each cycle and really had to rely on them. But Major Burns was a transfer he is from Baton Rouge, but transferred back to LSU from Georgia. Greg Brooks from Arkansas. Now, both those guys have been in the program now multiple years. Major's been here a couple of years. Greg was here all of last year. But then you look at Andre Sam, as we talked about, who's coming from Marshall, was where he was last playing after starting out at McNeese. Then at the corner spot, Zy Alexander was coming from Southeastern, making the jump from FCS to the SEC. And then we talked about Deuce Chestnut, obviously, from Syracuse. Denver Harris, if he gets in from A&M. We're not talking about LaTerrence Welsh, who was their only returning player. The one signee that they have that was kind of really breaking through has been Ashton Stamps. He obviously hasn't played a college snap yet. So it just feels to me like DB remains a big question mark, even beyond them shuffling pieces, because not so much at safety, but at corner, there are just so many unknowns for both what the lineup will be and how good the guys actually are.
Yeah, I think you phrased it well. It when you lay it out like that, it is staggering the fact that the only players that signed with LSU out of high school were Sage Ryan, LaTerrence Welsh, Ashton Stamps, and then obviously you get to Javian Toviano. Everybody else, and you go deeper into the depth chart to the young guys, but still, as far as contributors this year, those are the only guys in the secondary that signed with LSU out of high school. It's just,
which is very that's not the norm, because
no.
LSU is known for recruiting at a high clip at DB, corner and safety. They put a ton of guys in the league. So you hope that this is just a brief period of time they're going through. It's a transition period from one regime to the next in terms of head coach. So certainly the goal is to rebuild through the high school pipeline, and they're doing that this cycle. We've talked a lot about that on the recruiting podcast with a lot of good corner additions, of some really good safety additions from Louisiana. But this year is another one, Matty B, most notably at corner, where we go into it just not knowing what to expect.
Yeah. Running back was another interesting talking point for a couple reasons. I want to talk about Kaleb Jackson first and foremost because he was probably the quote unquote winner of the scrimmage period on Saturday, because he had a 70-yard screen pass go for a touchdown where he bounced off 3 different tacklers, and then he had an 18 and 19-yard touchdown run earlier in the scrimmage where he bounced off again 2 tacklers. I think it was Parashan and whoever was the secondary guy. I mean, it left a lot of people saying you got to get him on the field. You got to play him. You need Kaleb Jackson in this lineup in a room with 8 players, and him being one of only 2 freshmen. People are saying he has to get on the field here. And then Brian Kelly comes out yesterday and says, we need to pump our brakes. We need to slow down, because as much as good as he is as a runner and the potential is clearly there, I think you were even there. We were there throughout fall camp at times where it was he had a fumble that I saw. He had a dropped pass that was just right there in the flat that he drops, basically goes off his helmet, goes in the air. Sage Ryan intercepts it, and then you just have the tactical aspect of it where there's so much learning. Where he didn't play football last year for most of the season at Liberty, and now he comes in. There's so much to learn. So he stepped on the brakes a little bit from the media being excited and the fans being very excited about Kaleb Jackson.
Yeah, I was trying to bring up, this is why you got to be subscribed to the Bengal Tiger. You would not have had to wait for Brian Kelly to say pump the brakes, because Matty B, you did a really good breakdown on all the freshmen that are on the team right now and kind of where things stand with them after fall camp. And you wrote just that. You said, hey, look, Kaleb Jackson's been really impressive. But as many times we've seen it be impressive, it's also been those moments, as you said, fumble it, goes off your hands. We don't even know what he looks like in pass pro and stuff like that. Obviously, Kelly and them have a very good grip on everything he's done. I'm not surprised. I wasn't surprised to see you write it, and it kind of reminded me, yes, you got to remember there's a lot of veterans on this team who they can really trust, certainly out of the gates. And then Brian Kelly kind of matches what you said, which is exactly that. He's a freshman who is getting used to playing football again. And those flashes you see are what he's capable of. Now, is that a routine is a different question. So we'll see how it unfolds. I'm curious, though, with the running back room, they have 8 of them. Are we to a point where everyone's healthy now? What's the update there?
Yeah, that's what Brian Kelly said. That was the big thing yesterday was Logan Diggs, Josh Williams, and Armani Goodwin have been sidelined probably for close to 10 days before yesterday. And yesterday, he said, was the first day they had all of them back. So it looked like they were all on the same timeline. I'm not sure what exactly was holding them out. But to get Diggs, Williams, and Goodwin back, he said they had their full complement of running backs. So all 8 were healthy and available for them. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think Logan Diggs and Josh Williams are the 2 on paper that make the most sense to be the 1-2 punch. And then I still like Emery and Kane to work in there a lot. Those would be my 4 as far as if I had to divvy up who's going to get the most snaps / carries. That would be my group. And that falls in line with what Brian Kelly's said time after time is experience is going to win out in this room. That's obvious.
I'm going to make a statement here as a fact, and I've done no research on it. So if I'm wrong, I'm not. I'm going to guess, but no, I don't know. It would depend. There were a lot of triple option teams back in the day, maybe. But in college football, how many teams in history have had 8 scholarship running backs on roster, and none of them led the team in rushing?
It would have to be like an Army or something.
Some old
like
Nebraska teams, probably, I guess,
Yeah.
if you were carrying that many running backs.
That is funny.
Or lumping fullbacks or H-backs into the running back room. But 8 true running backs, and I mean, I'm not that is what makes Jaden Daniels very good. He's the best dual threat quarterback in the country. There is a good chance that none of those guys outrush him.
No. So there's a super high. If Jaden Daniels even just ends up with 650 yards this year rushing,
which he had more than that last year.
He had 800 something last year. Like there's a good chance only Logan Diggs had that last year where he had 800 and he was very much a featured back at Notre Dame. I've maintained that Logan Diggs is probably the one that I trust the most to be a all around back, and he's young. He has some pop in him, but I don't think he's going to get to 700 yards this year. That would fairly surprise me, honestly.
You know what? Kind of a final thought on running back is, I guess, a good thing, but a thing to remember. So many people hear the 8 scholarship running backs and are like, "What? It's too much. It's over the top." It wasn't 5 months ago that we watched spring practices where they had 2 the entire time. It was Noah Kane and Trey Holly, who was an early enrollee. Everybody else was recovering from injury, and we've seen it before. Josh Williams got injured last year. Armani Goodwin got injured again last year, twice actually during the season. Noah Kane actually stayed healthy the whole time. John Emery's been in and out of the lineup with academic stuff for the past 2 seasons, more than that, I guess. So that 8 can shrink down in a hurry. I doubt it's going to be 8 every week. It'd be great if it were, but regardless, I like it because no matter kind of what dominoes fall in the wrong way for them, they've still got other options that can be more than good enough to carry that position and what they need out of it this year, in my opinion. Knowing that Jaden Daniels will run the ball a good bit, you're going to be able to open up the passing game. I like where they're at running back.
Yeah, and I do think after this year, it'll thin out just by natural attrition.
100%.
Of Williams, Emery, Kane, I believe, are all in their final year.
Yes, I've got a piece coming. By the time this is out, it'll already be up on the site. But the seniors on offense do include a trio of running backs in Josh Williams, John Emery, and Noah Kane. So those guys alone will be done. Toss in if anyone wants to transfer, if a guy blows up like Diggs and wants to test the NFL waters, I don't know. But 8 is a lot now. It may sound like by the time the season ends, that's cut in half. So
the final position I want to talk about here and that Brian Kelly talked about, well, because, I had to ask him about it, was Zalance Heard and the offensive line. It was probably the second most surprising thing outside of Sage Ryan at the scrimmage was Zalance Heard going out with the first team on the first possession. And then he goes out again on the third possession with the first team. The second possession, he was with the second team. So he got like a ton of reps. He went first team, the second team, back to first team. We've said it before, they want to see what they have here. And as much as we can look at this is a 5-star top 20 player in the country and we see him in practice be very, very good, there's a difference between that and obviously the games. And I thought he held his own, first of all, in the scrimmage. I thought he looked pretty good. But more in the bigger point is it was Heard with Jones at guard and then Turner, Dellinger, and Campbell. So Miles Frazier was the one that was kind of left out there. And we know how good Miles Frazier is. So if you're pushing Miles Frazier out, that is a pretty substantial change there. I don't think that they've decided on Zalance Heard being a starter for certain, but I think they're flirting with it. And I don't. If I had to like put a percentage on it, I think it's probably still like maybe 30% chance he starts week 1 against Florida State, but that percentage is more than what I thought a week ago.
What I think this is it makes you feel even more confident that Zalance Heard is a 5-star and top 3 offensive tackle in the class, because he made it on the preseason true freshman All-American team for On3 this week. He and tight end Kamorian Pimpton. And Charles Power, our national director of scouting and rankings, who watched Zalance plenty in high school, he ranked him as a 5-star and number 2 offensive tackle in the country. He said, when he called and said, hey, what's kind of the breakdown of LSU? What guys are kind of rising to the top in the freshman class? And we talked about Heard knocking on the door. And he said, look, I've gone up and down this list of every major team, all the kids who are offensive tackles in the top 30 or whatever. And nobody is starting anybody in game 1, no doubt, this year that is a true freshman offensive tackle. And LSU had 2 of them last year that started the whole season basically, in Emory Jones and Will Campbell. And they were very talented, and that's great. And those guys made history by being the first 2 offensive tackle true freshman starters in LSU program history. You don't want to be in that position if you don't have to be. And teams like Bama, Georgia, they're signing 5-star linemen every year. Doesn't mean they start right away because they built up good depth. LSU's there, or getting there at least, to where Zalance Heard isn't a shoe-in to start. But the fact that he's knocking on the door and could potentially bump someone who started double-digit games like Miles Frazier out of the lineup to get him on the field speaks to how good he is. So I believe Brian Kelly said it a couple times this offseason that they've got 7, 8, 9 guys maybe on the offensive line that, depending on how you move them around, they trust to play. And that is a far cry from where they were a year ago.
Yeah. If Heard was here last year, he would have gotten all the reps at tackle. It would have been
and
day
Emory
one,
Jones
him and Campbell just put him at tackles. Heck, Jones might have started at guard. They would have started 3 freshmen out there.
Well, Zalance and Will are the Neville folks who are listening are hoping that those 2 can do what they did in high school, which was unfairly start for the same high school football team.
One of the more fun tapes to watch, offensive lineman tapes to watch, is watching the Heard tape, I think, of his junior year, where it's him and Will Campbell. And you're just like, this is incredible.
I would have been tempted to put like Heard or Campbell at guard and just put them on the same side and just run behind them on every single play and just let those 2 just crush everybody.
Yeah, that's
you're getting at least 5 yards every play if you're just falling behind those 2 guys in high school. Yes. But I do think it speaks. I don't know. What's your prediction on Heard? I don't think game 1.
I don't think.
But I think week 2 Grambling sets up very well for you to feel out these kind of situations.
Yeah, I still trust Miles Frazier a bit too much here. I just think you have to in week 1 against Florida State again. You have to know what you have. There can't be question marks, because if there is an unknown that ends up coming back to bite you, it will lose you the game in this situation. And I want to roll with what I know and what I have in Miles Frazier and Emory Jones on that right side. So that would be what I would do at this moment.
You probably don't want to, for the second year in a row either, have to block Jared Verse with a true freshman. And if you roll a true freshman out there, Florida State defensively will move Jared Verse around and get him matched up. That's what they did last year with Will Campbell. And Will Campbell's a great offensive tackle, but it was game one. So I don't know about Florida State. I probably would guess he's not going to be out there as a starter. Might play some, but
Yeah.
week 2 is where I'm looking for him to get some extended reps.
Yeah. No other positions I don't think of note as far as what Brian Kelly talked about. We don't have an update on Mason Smith at this point, and we can't watch practices. So I'm going to assume he's still going through individual workouts.
Yeah, I'm going to guess he's fine. They're bubble wrapping him until you're rolling.
Yeah, I don't think he's going through 11 on 11s out there in practice anymore for the foreseeable future before week 1. So, yeah, we'll see next media availability, probably get some clarity and make sure Mason Smith is okay. But other than that, I think that covers everything.
Yeah, well, we're about to draft or at least make our picks for some MVPs. We'll do offense, defense, tap into the freshman class. So be thinking of those if you're listening. Get your MVPs on your mind. Weigh in on the site once we post it there, of course. But we do want to give a shout out to Gametime, who's been one of our sponsors here this month on the pod. If you're not familiar with Gametime ticketing app, get it now. Go to the App Store, download the app, Gametime, one word. You can create an account and use Tigers, Tigers. Get you $20 off your first purchase. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. I said it last week. Football, basketball, any sort of sports, concerts, theater, plays, whatever you want to go see, they've got it. I actually, that was this past weekend on the Gametime app, secured some tickets for Smoothie King. 1975 will be there in October. Ooh. It is during the week, so I don't have to miss any football, Maddie B. Don't worry.
If you did, I'd understand. I would understand.
Yes, if in fact I should have bought an extra. Brought Matty B to the 1975. Let him get a taste of some good rock at the moment. But used it. It was super easy. 2 clicks. I actually got a good look at my seats before I purchased them, which is something Gametime is pretty well known for. So again, download the Gametime app. We do have that Tigers promo code TIGERS, $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Matty B, they'll be buying tickets for Tiger Stadium this fall, obviously, to see a number of pretty marquee matchups. The guys who could really turn the page for LSU, who are the MVPs of if these guys show out and have big seasons, it takes LSU to that next level. We can predict them however you want. You can pick them however you want. But I want to start offense. And when you think of offensive MVP, you often immediately go to the people who have the ball in their hand the most.
Yeah.
So we're talking quarterback, running back, receiver. We've already broke down the running backs plenty here. I would be quite surprised if someone in the running back room was considered the MVP at season's end. I just think there's too many of them. Yeah. So we settled on quarterback, receiver. I'll let you go first, though, so people don't have to wait. And then I'll weigh in with my quarterback take.
Yeah, I got Malik Neighbors. I think he's been the best player on the team throughout fall camp the past 2 weeks. I think he is going to be a first-round draft pick. He's going to be one of the top 3 receivers in the country on production and just, the eye tests. He has passed everything. I think Brian Kelly talked about it a good amount is last year he was good, but you could tell at times in practice, maybe in games, he didn't know how to get locked in the way that he is locked in now. It's a different player. And we've seen over the past two or so years, you can tell, and I mean, kind of in general, you can tell in fall camp what the player is going to be in this season. And we saw last year, Malik Neighbors was going to be a good player. And he ends up obviously having a 1,000-yard season in 14 games. This year, he's taken the next step forward. And I think that is very promising. And in a passing game that I said on the board, I had some question marks about still. I don't have a question mark about Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels. If he just throws to Malik Neighbors every single time, they're going to be a damn good offense. So, yeah, that Malik Neighbors is my MVP on offense.
1,000-yard receiver a year ago. Let's see if we can touch that again. said it, I guess it was last week's pod, maybe, but there's going to be so many spots this year where they just need a play on 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 8. And it's going to become evident, like they're going to have to get it to Malik here. And we've seen it with their elite receivers in the past. That's what those guys do. Jarvis, Odell, Jefferson, Chase, you name them. There were so many times where you had to have it and those guys stepped up. I think Malik is very much cut from that same cloth. So I like that pick. I didn't want to pick the same one. So I'm going Jaden. And this is a vote of confidence that he does remain the starting quarterback all year. I think his combination of what he can do running the football and what he can do with his arm, whether that's designed runs or just getting you out of trouble or scrambling for a first down, whatever it might be, he can keep the sticks moving. I think that the Heisman talk, if LSU wins a bunch of games, and certainly if they get into November with a loss, maybe no losses, that can put him at the forefront of a Heisman conversation. So I am on the Jaden train right now. I'm also on the Nuss bus. I'm riding both, but he's their starter. I do think, and I thought Brian Kelly made a very good point about this too. Everyone has made such a big deal, and it's a big deal, about the downfield passing game, but equating that to an explosive passing game or saying that's the only way you can get there. And Brian Kelly said, look, it's also in the short and intermediate game, setting yourself up for explosive plays, which I immediately thought Aaron Anderson, coming out of the slot, or John Emery catching those wheel routes or screen passes. Like they can be explosive in different ways that isn't just trying to get vertical with, big plays to Hilton or, Neighbors, even Lacey and Brian Thomas, obviously. They need that element, but I think that if Jaden and this offense can master just getting the ball in the hands of playmakers, if it is the screen game, if it is just Aaron Anderson kind of playing that slot role, that can be explosive. I don't know. I just think at season's end, we're going to look back like we did a year ago and say they probably would have lost a couple of games had they not had Jaden at quarterback.
Yeah. Two things real quick. I do agree with the explosive part Brian Kelly said, and it brings me back to what Mike Denbrock said about getting his receivers in a position where they're not catching the ball with their back facing the end zone. So obviously more stuff. That doesn't have to be downfield. That can, like you said, that can be an intermediate route where, the slant drag, whatever. But they ran so many of those like kind of comeback type things last year. And this year, in order to be more explosive, it doesn't have to be super down the field. It can be 5, 6, 7 yards, but you get them on the run where they can then make a play. And we saw Malik Neighbors against Purdue last year, come off and just go 70 yards weaving through traffic. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I do think it's not talked about how, and maybe it's been a little underrated over this offseason, is how elite of a runner Jaden Daniels is and how important that is. Like we as a media can all talk, and fan base, I guess, can all talk about Jaden Daniels' potential struggles as a passer at times, which came up last year. But ultimately, what he does with his legs is an absolute game changer. And I don't want people to forget about that because you don't beat Alabama without his legs. You don't almost beat Florida State without his legs. Like there's every game he was just awesome as a runner as well. And that is a truly valuable piece of this offense.
It's very easy to say I'd like, any player on the team to do this better. And I need Jaden to throw deep more. And yeah, he's very efficient, but it was a lot of short passes and he needs to, not take off as much and run or less design runs. Well, no one was complaining when he kept that read option on the first play of overtime against Alabama. Alabama just scored. And in one play you've scored and now you can go for 2 to win it. Just and he throws a great ball to Mason Taylor. So like there were many games where they would not have won the game had Jaden not been the quarterback. There were also many games where Arkansas, he didn't play well. He was banged up. It was like, all right, put Nussmeier in then. And they will do that this year. If he's banged up and they're not playing well or just doesn't look like Jaden. And remember that Arkansas game, that's what it became. It became you have him out there because of how great he can do it with his legs and his arm. If his legs are taken away, then put Nussmeier out there, in spots. That'll be something to be at least worth monitoring. But I am riding with Jaden. I think he's going to be the starter wire to wire.
Yeah. Defense.
Yes.
I You asked me first on both of these, so I just took the best players on both sides. I just took Harold Perkins. Now, I don't think there's going to be a question of Harold Perkins, but we've watched them for 2 weeks in fall camp. We saw the scrimmage, and I still don't fully know how Harold Perkins is going to be used. I saw there was a 3rd and 8 with the ones versus ones, and Harold Perkins moved out to outside linebacker / edge, and I was like, oh, this is it. We get to see Harold Perkins on the edge again. It's like good old times. And then he dropped into coverage, and I was like, okay, I don't know. And maybe that's a good thing because opposing offenses have no clue at this point. But it's probably the thing I'm looking forward to most is how in the world they're using Harold Perkins, because I still think he's going to be attacking probably 60-70% of the time. He'll be, used in quarterback spy type situations as well, but he's also going to drop into coverage. He's going to be featured. He's going to have to stop the run. Like, there are a ton of responsibilities now on his plate. He's been practicing with Matt House the past 7-8 months to try to get this down. And like I said before, he starts the year with Florida State, so he's got to be sharp. But I think at the end of the day, he's going to put up incredible numbers again, north of 80 tackles, north of 16 tackles for loss, north of 7-8 sacks. Like, that's basically the stat line he had last year. I think he's going to supersede all of that.
Yeah, well, now he's going to be playing every down instead of,
Yes.
a little bit on special teams. And then, as Kelly said, and we've talked about this a lot this offseason, this whole idea of, as you noted, 7 months spent with linebackers coach Matt House learning how to play linebacker. And Kelly said on Tuesday of this week, when asked about Perkins, he said he didn't fall short of anything we asked him to do at linebacker last year because we never asked him to do it. We just said, go play edge and rush the passer, go spy the quarterback. Like, now he's built into his game all these levels of being a linebacker and what it means. And I'm with you. I'm curious how that translates to what they really want him to be doing this fall. But no doubt, I'm with you. They're not going to get away from getting him into the backfield and after the quarterback or the running back or whatever it might be. So they're not going to let him just cover people all game or, sit there and be a run stuffer like a Greg Penn. You're going to find ways to get him back like he was a year ago, just doing it from a little bit different spot. And it won't surprise me at all if he's playing some edge rusher and they've got Penn and Spates out there at linebacker or whatever it might be. I think you just got to continue to use him in whatever way you see fit. I would have picked Perkins too, maybe. But I just keep leaning on this. I even waffled on naming him my top player on the team. I'm still riding Mason Smith. I think that what he brings to the defensive line, when you've already got Mekhi Wingo, when you've already got Savion Jones, who I think is going to have a breakout junior season this fall as a defensive end, he demands a double team. And if he doesn't get it, he's going to beat whoever he's up against almost every time. So now that he's healthy again, drawing doubles, that's going to open up so much for everyone else, including potentially guys like Perkins. I just think that he's such a valuable piece that was missing last year. And when it went missing, they had to rely on 2 or 3 guys to carry them the whole season. Now they've got more depth than that, and Mason Smith returning. I still lean on what Brian Kelly said too, and I've seen Mason since high school. A year ago, he said this guy's going to be a household name to everyone in the country by the end of his sophomore year. Well, drive number 1, he gets hurt. Done for the year. Now I think he's going to be a household name for the same reasons, production, but that's going to elevate him not as a sophomore, but junior into being a first-round pick. So much like your neighbor's selection, I think that Mason Smith is a first-round pick on defense. If the knee's healthy, everything looks good, he plays a healthy season, he will, no doubt in my mind, be off to the NFL and playing on Sundays. I just think he's that elite of a player.
Yeah. Then the freshman. We both just picked one freshman. I think I maybe could have picked one on both sides, but I took Zalance Heard. Again, I had the first pick, so I took Zalance Heard. So best freshman, highest ranked, I think, or him and Womack were the highest ranked out of the class. Heard is going to be pushing for a starting job. I think at some point this year, there will be, I don't know when the last time ever across the country, that nobody's ever gotten hurt. So it's just kind of how it goes. So we'll see how Zalance Heard works in there. If someone has to miss a game, someone has to miss a drive, a play, Zalance Heard step in, and I think he'll get a lot of reps this year at tackle. And I'm excited to see him.
Yeah, I think that Zalance has the best chance of any freshman to start for the reasons you mentioned. Talent and offensive linemen are always getting hurt. You could have poor play, whatever it might be. There's a chance to get him on the field, considered that right now he's getting first team reps to start out the final scrimmage of fall camp. Like, he's knocking on the door as one of those guys.
Yeah.
The other, I mentioned this, Kamorian Pimpton at tight end is the other guy who landed on 3's true freshman preseason All-America team. I think with Pimpton, you're going to see a guy who's going to play a backup role primarily, but still get to play. And that could result in some wow moments. That could give you a few touchdowns. We'll see. 6'6", 245. He's a freak. And you don't want to just leave him on the bench. So he's going to play, but you've got a returning starter in Mason Taylor. And you've got some inline blockers that you would use well before Kamorian Pimpton. So I'm going Ashton Stamps here. And the Sage Ryan moving to corner is messing my prediction up a little bit, because that gives them a little more depth at corner before you get to Stamps. But
messing with the Stamps camp.
Yes, but if it were Deuce Chestnut and Zy Alexander at corner, like we've seen for a lot of the spring, or excuse me, a lot of the fall, that next guy up, or at least knocking on the door for number 3, was a true freshman in Ashton Stamps. And Denver Harris was on third team. J.K. Johnson, their other transfer from Ohio State, is hurt. It's going to be out a while. We don't even have a timetable there with the leg injury he's got. And then Welsh is your only returning guy. He was the other second team guy until Stamps moved up there with him and was really making a ton of plays. So depending on how the whole Sage Ryan, Chestnut, Zy Alexander thing goes at corner, at some point Stamps is getting out there. And if he looks good, they'll keep putting him out there. So behind Heard, I think he's got the second best chance, maybe alongside Pimpton, of seeing some extended action.
Honorable mentions real quick. I'll roll through them. You already mentioned Pimpton. I think Sampson has had a really good fall. I think he deserves a shout. Whit Weeks, I think, deserves a shout. And I think Javian Toviano, especially if Brooks is playing nickel. Now, I'm not saying they can't move him back to safety. Of course they can. But basically, if we just treat Brooks as a nickel and it's like, all right, Burns and Sam are your starting safeties, the next guy up is probably Javian Toviano. Like, if we're not accounting for Brooks moving back there and maybe even Sage Ryan moving back there or whatever, but it's like the next guy up is Javian Toviano. So I think we see him in some capacity this year. So those would be my 3 honorable mention. Of course, I leave Deshaun Womack out, even though at this moment I still think he is going to have a great career at LSU and be really, really good. I just don't know how that's working out yet.
There is a good chance, certainly a chance, that I would put as good as Zalance Heard's and maybe another guy or two as we see them develop. But he could be the highest drafted player from this class. It's
For
just
sure.
that right now he wasn't here in the spring because he had a shoulder surgery he was recovering from. Kind of gets in shape over the summer. This was his first fall camp, so he's 3 weeks into putting on pads and going against college guys. Like, even playing at St. Francis, where they played a pretty big-time national schedule, you're still making a big jump to going up against college guys like Will Campbell and all them when you get reps. So that, coupled with Deand and Jack, rooms are just deep. Like, they've got older guys that have played and know the position. So I don't think he sits on the sideline all year. I just don't know right now exactly how much he's going to play, but boy, is he talented. I will say this, though. The all SEC teams came out this week, and we didn't give any nods to special teamers here, but Nathan Dibert was on second team as a kickoff specialist. And then I believe Groudon was, what team was he? Third? I don't remember if he made it, but he should. I think he's one of the conference's best. I think he'll be up there with the best in the conference at punter. I think one question about special teams I still have is it Ramos or is it Dibert? Like, Are we just presuming Ramos is the starting
I'm
kicker again?
presuming, all the assuming. I'm doing everything. I
Like, we
assume
don't
it's
get to watch a lot of that in practice. Like, they're
no.
not ever like we've seen them kick, but they just both sit there and they just rotate. Like,
Yeah,
so Brian
I
Kelly's not
assume.
come out and said at all at any point this guy is starting and this guy isn't. And we didn't talk to Jancic, who's kind of overseeing special teams, did we?
No, we didn't.
In camp, Kelly stepped
No.
in for him on the
Mhm.
day he was supposed to talk. But I think we've figured out Aaron Anderson's their punt returner. You've got Bramplett back as your punter. You've got Dybert back as your kickoff specialist. We will see. I presume Ramos will be the starting kicker, but again, that's a presumption just because that's who it was last year when these two guys were on roster.
Yeah. Last freshman I want to give a shout out to is Mac Markway.
Oh yeah, he's played a ton.
Yeah, I did. I don't. Again, it's it's still a very
Inline
new thing.
blocker is an easy thing to skip past.
Yeah.
I'd
So
actually would say that if you're talking snap count by season's end,
he might lead it.
he might lead it unless Heard starts, and then he'd be second, I would think.
He might lead it. It's going to be interesting. There's the tight end position is fascinating. That's just a lot of things are fascinating to me right now when looking at this team. We are 10 or 11 days away from kickoff in Orlando against Florida State. So we'll be back with we'll return to our regularly scheduled podcast schedule next week. We're going to do one more podcast this week to get y'all ready for that game week. But like I said, next week we'll do Monday mailbag, all the good stuff. We'll have a Florida State guy on in the middle of the week as well, and then we'll get into our preview stuff. So, later this week we're gonna have some season preview type stuff, season predictions, story up on the site later on. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you all for joining us. Leave us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on the audio side. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment. Let us know what you think. Send it to a friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Bengal Tiger On3. It's almost this time for the season. Scoops on everything, inside analysis, all the good stuff, and recruiting visits. They come up like crazy throughout the fall. So, yeah, thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to y'all later.